Morning, everyone. Please just have a seat. I will be beginning my presentation within 1 minute. Make yourselves comfortable and enjoy. Okay. All right. Very good morning to everyone, and thank you for coming over to Alumni Day. Thank you especially as well for coming for my talk. My name is Matthew Huan. I work here at the Chau Chak Wing Museum on specifically the insect or the entomology collections. So with my presentation over here, we'll try to, let's see, sell our collection in that sense. How do we make use of it and how do we serve our communities using them? All right. So before I begin, I'm just going to give a very quick acknowledgement that we acknowledge the treasure custodians of the country on which the university campuses stand and our responsibility and respect and care for the country, people, and experience. Okay, so just a little bit about myself. I am the museum officer here working with the entomology collections, which forms part of the Macleay collections here at the Chau Chak Wing Museum, University of Sydney. Previously was the Macleay Museum. If you are alumni, you would know it would have been at the Faculty of Science, but now. So the collections used to belong to the old Macleay Museum, and now it's all combined together with the Nicholson Museum, which covers archaeology and ancient history, and also the University Art Collection. So they've all been pulled together into this one building, which is the Chau Chak Wing building, which was opened in November 2020, right after the COVID lockdown. So we've gone through quite a significant number of changeovers already. What you see on displays over here, almost all are entirely new from when we first opened. So that's just a sample of the sort of specimens that I work with, because it's with the insect collections. And over here, we've got examples of butterflies and moths from different parts of the world, Asia, and you've got the morphos from South America. You've got some Australian species as well. Okay. Let's see. Now, just a very quick introduction. Macleay collection comprises of natural history and ethnography and some general collections as well. Under natural history, these would come under the zoological collections. It was founded by this gentleman over here, Sir Alexander Macleay, first colonial secretary of New South Wales, who migrated over from Scotland in 1826, I believe. And when he came up, even before that, while he was in Scotland, he was already collecting insects. And at the time, these were at the very beginnings of science as a branch of knowledge. So that would have involved taxonomy as well, where they were trying to classify organisms back in those days. And at the time when he moved over here, he probably brought the largest private collection of insects in the world at that time. So it was quite significant. And the collections we have here, it's really significant for its historic city. Then he passed that over to his son, William Sharp Macleay, and then it passed on over to William John Macleay, who in the end decided between donating the collections here to the University of Oxford or the University of Sydney. And we're very lucky because he decided to go with the University of Sydney. So yay. Okay. So in our collections here, we try to say, why does it matter that we keep them? Because one thing as well, maintaining collections and having all that storage space, it is costly. It does take up things like resources, finances. You've got temperature controls, you've got security controls, you've got pest controls and all that. But and the other thing that we have to try to make use of that as well, because nowadays, in the general sense, for myself, as a researcher working on this, for me, yes, I like insects and find them important. But with a general public perception, usually insects are not really looked at in a very positive light. There's a very quick, some research that I did. If you did a worldwide query on insects, usually what comes up first is insect bites and insect repellents and how do you kill insects, right? So that's not just worldwide, or here in Australia as well, top 10 results, well, insect killers and insect repellents and all. So I think we try to make use of these collections to try to change the perceptions that insects are not all bad as well. When just another example where there was this species of a stick insect that was seen or sighted in Western Australia, and people call it, oh, creature from hell, you know. So it's we're trying to really have to, how do you say, it's an uphill struggle even for myself trying to promote this collection. So I try to do the best that I can. In one of these ways that I try to do it is like from the stock, having that. So how maybe we can try to demonstrate the value of insects. They have their ecological services. When you think about it, it's for free as well. They clear up a lot of waste from around here because bacteria, we know that, you know, things get broken down by fungi and bacteria, but usually the rate that they decompose stuff is really too long. So you need insects really to speed up that process of breaking them down. And in that sense, you know, then they recycle those nutrients back into our earth. Now, another simple example, pollination as well, by bees and flies and butterflies. Yes, actually flies as well are really important pollinators. Yeah, we think of them as insects that we want to spray and zap, but really they have ecological purposes. And without them, without pollinators, you know, no plants, no fruits for us, no vegetables, no feed for animals, no livestock, no beefsteaks or chicken for all of us. And other ways as well that we try to demonstrate it. This was a lecture that was given by one of the professors, Professor Richard, full of chemistry, that talked about drug discovery inspired by natural products. So anticoagulants, for example, from biting insects, mites and the mosquitoes and the leeches. So even they have their own useful purposes. And this is a publication as well. That's from one of my colleagues that he talked a little bit about bees, sort of inspired from our collections as well. If you're interested, you could have a look at this book where he talks about ancient Hittite culture, which are the ancestors of Turkish people today. It's on sale in our gift shop as well. Other ways that we try to demonstrate it, sometimes I'll look to it at other collections as well. I'm also a member of the Society for Insect Studies. That's sort of like the amateur insect club of Sydney, so to speak. And we did a biosecurity tour, 18 July 2023. So such collections like these are important because, you know, it really helps people, biosecurity officers, to identify, you know, there are any foreign invasive species that come in. You've got a reference point, or you can see, okay, this is not a local species. This is not meant to be here. What are we going to do about it? Right. And this, for example, as well, we've got requests for pest identifications. And this was reported by one of our clients, and we referred to this, or actually I referred to this within the collections that we have over here, because it's not something that I could find online, but simply because we've got the collections over here, this being a local species, I'm able to identify this is actually the pest that we have, and was able to provide the answer to our client. All right, I also did evaluation workshop. So in a sense, these collections have been used for education. I tried to talk about the value of the collections that we have over here. So I was just trying to do a comparative survey between different sorts of insects. Butterflies usually are pretty and all, they're at the top of the list. But based on the common sense response by a typical public, these insects that we have over here, these two examples, they were given negative value. So it's like the opinion was that we should chuck them away because they are old and they are, you know, heavily deteriorated, disintegrated. But the fact is, these are actually nymph stages of certain kind of insect called leaf insects. Leaf insects, of course, it's very hard to see them in nature because they're camouflaged perfectly. They look just like leaves. And what's even more valuable is because these are nymph stages, which means that they are sort of like in between the babies and the adults. So the juvenile or the teenagers or children stage, so to speak. It's very rare in collections. And in fact, these were used to describe a new genus of leaf insects by a collaborator, Royce Cummings and Vieta Runt. That was last year. And another example that we have over here, another insect that was given negative value because by virtue of being a cockroach. But really, this was cockroach of Lord Howe Island. You may have seen it in the news. It's been believed extinct for over 80 years and was just recently rediscovered by a researcher on a recent survey over there. So what they needed to do was to pick some genetic material from our sample and use that for genetic analysis to just confirm that really they are of the same species. And that's, the significance of our collections, really, because it goes back to the 1800s and even the 1700s before that. Another example of that, very recently, we've had a visiting professor, Dr. Angel Villoria from Venezuela, and he came and rediscovered 258 type collections. Now, type collections means the first ever of that kind of species, whatever it is. So let's say you have the first ever cat that was collected and made into a taxidermy animal, Felis domestica, the first ever specimen in the world. And that's used, in science, that's what we call a type specimen. All other cats in the future that are discovered from it will have to refer to that. Okay, this is a cat. So it's the same with these butterflies, all the species that I worked with the visiting professor, Dr. Angel over here, and we are in the process of trying to have the paper publication for this. So it's also made possible because all these are international collaborations. We can't do everything ourselves. And it's made possible with the Oxford University publishing this material that makes it easily accessible for us nowadays. Also, he's had to travel here under the Mikluho Makley fellowship that we had for 3 months, and we were just working from 9 or 10 to 7, just trying to pick out of the 300 plus thousand specimens that we have over here, working across 2 different sites. All right, education through exhibitions. So we had this, for example, an exhibition in the past on the topic of the color red. So besides using ethnographic collections as well, for example, shellac, which was used in the past to varnish or polish wood, for example, give that a nice red color, comes from this insect, which is a lac insect that we have in the collection. All right. And since we've opened at the Chau Chak Wing Museum here as well, we've had try to make use of them sort of like in interdisciplinary ways. So say if we had a display on animal gods, for example, that talks about the history of the Trojan War or the Odyssey of Ulysses. So we try to incorporate different parts of different collections into the show. It's not just entirely based on the archaeological or antiquities collections that we have. So we try to include, for example, these butterflies, which are named according to the heroes and the monsters and of the Greek myths and the legends. So, for example, these blue butterflies over here, those would be the Ulysses swallowtail. That's an example of trying to pull together and make this exhibition more interesting. All right. And also we encourage the faculties in the university over here to make use of collections. For example, we've got a B lab over here. We've got Faculty of Science, and we try to tie it in. For example, we did a wild bees display for 2 years. When people mention bees, like what's the first bee that usually comes to mind for everyone? I think it's probably, we'd say honeybees. But the thing is, there are about 20,000 different species of bees in the world. And sort of like wild bees are the ones that are just as important, but they really don't get much attention or much coverage on that. So this was a way of trying to provide exposure to that. And also a lot more critically endangered. Yes, honeybees have their own problems as well, but wild bees just as much. And also we did a Christmas beetle count project. That's with Dr. Tanya Letty from Faculty of Biology. And we try to make use, or we're exploring how to make use of our Christmas beetles in the Macaulay collection to tie in with that probably next year. You might see a display on that. If anyone were interested, I am very happy to give a tour on the current displays of insects we have downstairs. I've got these cards to give out as well. So after this talk is done, if you are interested, come and join me. We will make our way down to level 1 and I can talk at length about all these beetles that we have on display. Right. And other ways that we make use of collections as well, publications, or we try to make merchandise items out of them, and especially in education as well. And also with collaborators from external people outside of the university. So this is Casa Adams, and you can, Araceli, you can find her products in the university gift shop, but also Oh, sorry. Let me see. How do I rewind that? Yeah. Okay. How it started, how the collaboration started, because I gave a podcast on this certain group of butterflies. They're called Jersey Bell butterflies. If you're interested, you can listen to that as well. So she heard that and she got inspired to make ceramic products out of them. That's her specialty. She takes inspiration from nature, rock lobsters and crabs and shellfish and all of that. And she makes beautiful ceramics out of them. So that's sort of a way that we try to engage with the public as well. This was another one as well. I had my friend over here, Alex Babington. He had an exhibition display in a museum down over on Parramatta Road in Leichhardt, using entomology collections, actually my personal collection for that. It's just an example of how we're trying to outreach and try to make our collections be useful to communities in Sydney and also, abroad, worldwide now. All right, that's all for my presentation over here. Do join me for the trip down to level 1 if you are interested. Thank you very much. Oh, questions. Okay, yes. Using, how's that relevant? That's okay, yeah. Oh, no, sure. How's that relevant? Sort of like trying to demonstrate that the value of insects, even though they are pest or nuisance insects, they've got usefulness as well, because nowadays you can derive a lot of drugs and biologics, let's say even from wasps, for example. You've got the kind of chemicals that are from them, which you can use as painkillers, or from the mites and the mosquitoes and the ticks, you've got anticoagulants. So that's sort of like to make medication out of them that, for people who have issues with blood clotting and all, for example. Yeah. Hope that answers your question. Yeah. Thank you. Oh, another question. Yes. Christmas beetles.
We used to have really lovely iridescent ones, and I haven't seen one for years. Has something happened to Christmas beetles that they're disappearing?
Okay. So that's actually what we see as a general worldwide trend as well, because of there being very rapid changes in a lot of things, the climate, the way we use our lands, industrialization and all. So they depend very much on the environments that they used to have, lots of bushland, the temperature being, more stable and a bit more predictable. Nowadays, things have just changed a lot. And I think if you read reports everywhere, it's just species and biodiversity are all threatened because of all the changes that we're experiencing. Yeah. Yeah. You might have to go to places that are really very much less well developed, rural places really where there's still a lot of nature, because that's what it used to be like. Those are the sorts of environments that they would live in. So it's another way of looking at how collections should tend to become more valuable or more precious in the future, because unless our conservation efforts are successful, then who knows in the future, 50 to 100 years from now, the museums are the only places that would retain any of these biological specimens. It's not a very encouraging news, but that's just the reality of it today. All right. Yeah. All right. Thank you. Oh. Yep. Okay. So with the Maclay insect collections itself, because of restrictions with budgets and space constraints, it's essentially very much a closed collection. Now, I myself working on them, I'm working on the databasing of these specimens. And, don't think about adding in the specimens. There's still a lot more work that's just not been done. There's a lot of databasing, not just registering the data, but trying to make it public as well. But maybe if you looked at other institutions like the Australian Museum, for example, they do still actively collect the specimens. So it really depends on the institution itself, what its acquisition policies are. Yeah. Right. Thank you.